enriching my knowledge about a field, even if it then didn't make it to the actual thesis. So I think that this capacity of refraining from telling do this or do that was, you know, sometimes annoying from the student's perspective, because you would like to have more your recipe about what to do, but it's actually what makes you grow as a researcher, as an autonomous researcher.
Yeah, and then you are into what is later on my list on our expectations, but we do expect that. I will never accept a master thesis where the student has not spent time wandering around, you know, looking for opportunities. We do expect that. But I also learned after a while, after, you know, supervising some master students from Tanzania, that when I do that with my Norwegian students, they will start looking. But I did that with 2 students from Tanzania, and they did nothing for 6 weeks. You know, they said yes when I sent them an email, they were very polite and everything was fine. But afterwards I realized they wasn't, and I don't know if that's Tanzania or if it's only these 2 students, but they didn't have any tools to start wandering, start looking around. So, you know, I thought they were doing that, I thought they were reading, I thought they were, but they were more or less waiting for me to, yeah, let's finish up this period of time. Most probably he'll come back with some good ideas. You see, so that's also part of it. That is that we do expect students to do that, but we are not that good at asking ourselves, you know, if they are able to, capable to, or if they are trained to wander about without being too nervous about the end result. So I think that takes a while. And my first answer and best answer to that is to discuss, spend time, discuss how to do that from both sides of the table.
I think this student-teacher relationship is very contextual and deep-rooted in your culture. So I came up from the tradition where we call Guru Brahma, like teacher is a god. So he will tell us everything, and if he doesn't know the answers, then he is not a teacher. So that's our impression, you can say.
I'm curious on the second part.
So yeah, we actually give a lot of respect to the teacher, and that was the same experience with me when I came. And then I used to say always yes. So Mong was my supervisor, and I had a feeling I was a world-class researcher, and Øystein associate professor. So I remember first time I said, "Dear respected Professor Mong Sen," and he said, "Well, it seems like I'm sitting in some seminar or something like that. So don't say this kind of words." But so it took me 2 years to actually argue with Øystein and Mong that, no, you're wrong. Maybe the argument should be like this. So now I think yeah, it's a very good environment here. But the culture and the tradition, this also actually impact.
Yeah.
This relationship depends on how you understand each other's culture. So it's very, very interesting. But this guy is very adaptive, and I'm also very adaptive. So we try to understand our culture.
You are too adaptive.
So that is very interesting. That's very important to understand the context and then adapt the culture.
That's why I used to say the Dr. Øystein.
Please continue. I really like that.
I'm 100% agree what Dr. Devendra said. By the way, let me tell you that the thesis that he's defended 2 days before, it is his second doctorate degree, or?
Yeah.
Huh? Yes. Yeah. And whenever I used to, because Dr. Øystein is my examiner, one of the examiners of my PhD thesis, and since then I had an impression that the way you expressed that there is a cultural impact, because I'm truly having a different culture, and now I'm doing some sort of work and learning environment, which is quite different than the environment that I used to lead or I used to live. So this cannot be taken away overnight. I mean, it will take time to be transformed into certain environment.
For sure. No, I think you are perfectly correct. You know, I also, as you said, I went to Sevach to discuss his work, I'm not saying good at it, but I'm trying to then to reflect on, you know, to spend 5 minutes to understand who is this guy. Because I didn't know you, Serge, before doing that. Because if I'm just saying, do like that, or I'm doing the opposite, and saying, you know, let's discuss everything, that will not communicate if you are not, if the receiver is not used to or familiar with that kind of thinking. So it's important on both sides to do that. Let me have a short comment about the winner. He did like that in the beginning, on everything. That is no in Norway. But that was yes in Europe. And we went to Nepal and we were traveling around, and the winner always did that. I was like, couldn't understand a thing, you know. Should we have lunch? Yes. For me, that's two ways communication, you know. So, you know, just very minor issues, but you know, you need to understand how that actually works. So, and we do have different background. And another issue to think about when you are entering, if it's UK or Norway or wherever, and you move to another area, is that we do expect you to know, we have some common knowledge in every society, which is expected of you to know about. You know, if we do discuss issues on Second World War or on this Norwegian society, we tend to forget that, you know, that's not common knowledge for everyone who hasn't been in Europe before they came here to start a PhD. And of course the same thing, I've been in Tanzania and Nepal, and I don't know anything about these societies. But I've been, I know a little bit, and that helps, because it's very, very difficult. And I guess a lot of the problems with you discussing with supervisors, if you are in that kind of situation, is also that they don't know your strength, they don't know your, you know, your societies, and they actually maybe they are not too good at realizing that that's a strength and that's something you have to put into relationship as well. So there are for sure something excellent of putting in this different background as well. Let me further say that, you know, my experience with students coming from Africa or Asia is that you are on a huge range according to quality. The best students are really, really excellent. The worst students are much poorer than our students, our worst student in Norway. So if the Norwegian students are around here, you know, what I'll get on this development management program is around here. And it's easy to explain, but it also influences very much how I do teach that course. In some of the societies, you know, you may be elected as 1 out of 300, and of course this one is really, really good. From some other universities, they are struggling, and they do send some people who happens to be working there, you know, and they might not be interested in the work, but they're interested in the funding for coming to Norway. And we have had some difficulties here that, you know, the payment here is quite good. So some of the students, they are doing a lot of work outside school. You know, they tend to work all nights, all afternoons, focusing on how to get some income to send back to the families. Well and good, but it will not help your career if you like to stay in doing research, and it makes you down on this end of the scale as well. So I never know what I will get when I start working with these group of students. But the best students are by far really, really good. The reason for that is also that Norwegian students, I think the same in Sweden and maybe UK, they do have their families, they do expect to go back home at 4 o'clock and not be interrupted in the evenings, and from 5 until Monday morning they don't do anything that is related to work. To be a little bit, but it's a little bit like that. While Devinder and other people are coming in, you know, working very hard to get a PhD, or working very differently. And that changes also the expectations to me as a supervisor. Because if I'm really interested in working with these guys who are very good and are willing to do that, you know, I can't be the one who's saying at 3 o'clock on Friday evening, I'll not come back with any kind of feedback until, you know, lunch on Monday. So if you're one of these guys, don't pick one of the typical Norwegian guys who will not do anything outside working hours. Skip them.
I think again the cultural thing, when I was in South Korea before, I used to stay up around 12 o'clock in the night in the lab. So the culture in Korea is, you stay in the lab. What you are doing is not important. You should be in the lab. That's important. So when I came to Norway, and then I used to stay until 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock. Then everyone started to ask, hey, you don't have any family life? Go back. What are you doing here? Don't work too hard. And it's a kind of cultural shock. I said, oh,
Need to have some activities back home.
I'm just staying up to 5 and they're saying that you're killing yourself. And I said, okay, that's a heaven. So
but we do work while we are at work, and that's the difference as well. When I go to different societies, and I see people sitting there for last, until 9 o'clock in the night and they don't do anything, I'm thinking, come on, get a life. No, there's any more interesting thing. You can go on a boat trip, and do some interesting stuff. So that's different. I think it's very important to, this is actually not only about Norwegian or Adger or Sweden or anything. It's about going to somewhere else. I think it's very, very important to realize that there are some untold expectations. Maybe, if you're lucky, they're also told. But there are a lot of expectations, and there are in our group, in Bjørn's department, information system department, we have a very clear idea on how things should be done, which is not told. So I can take a master. If the window is supervising a master student, I can easily look at that that report, and we will immediately, and Bjørn as well, we will immediately agree if this is good or bad. We can discuss details, but we do know that. Maybe we have a two-side document on, telling what should be in a thesis, but we have a much clearer picture in our head, which is common knowledge on how that should be. And that's important to remember, wherever you go. That try to understand what is expected from where you are. And it takes a while. That's the reason for going to courses, to read all the master theses before, to do all that kind of stuff, to understand what is going on. For example, I think, let's see. Maybe we should do that. I have started to give this to my students. Also, my students coming from wherever they are. And someone is saying, you shouldn't do that, because you can't put everyone into the same system. You can't just tell them, this is the way to do. And I haven't been around for 50 years, but I've been around for some few years, and I'm more and more interested in telling my students, what do I expect? Because I think it's not fair if I'm afterwards reading the reports and their work with a very clear understanding of what I'm looking for, if I haven't told beforehand, and no reason not to tell. If you would like to be my student at Adger, this is the way I do expect, or this is the way you will be judged afterwards. Isn't that better than to argue like, do whatever, but I will judge you like this. So, you'll get the presentation, you don't need to put this down. But this is one way to do that, and actually it's Peter Larsen's work. But this is one way to do that, and that is to ask the students to fill in. When you start working here, if we start to work together on a master, on a PhD level, whatever, I will ask the students, fill in this list. What are you interested in? What's your area of concern? What are the research questions? Based on your interest and your research question, what kind of research approach are you thinking about? It is common knowledge in some sense, but for me it helps to discuss, what do we expect? And if I do then discuss with my students afterwards, we will end up, of course, to discuss what's in here, but we'll end up even more to discuss what is the relationship between the research questions and your research approach, for example. That's quite difficult for a new student to understand. There are some reasons why you are doing qualitative work or why you are doing quantitative work, but there are some reasons why you are looking into this area, picking this theory. So that is where we end up, discussing based on this list. Framework, what are you going to, what is the theoretical lenses? What kind of data collection are you planning? What kind of data analysis approach are you planning? And what do you think will be your contribution? And for me, this is a dynamic document that we do discuss every now and then, go back and forth. And feel free to take that and start using it if you like. I'm not saying this is the only way, but I'm saying this is some way to do that. What do you think, Rahul? Is this very different from? Similar. So I think in some sense this is also common. If you come with this list, you know, in the IS world or ICT for D area, you know, people say, oh, we could discuss some differences, but you know, this is mainly the way we do think. Why don't we discuss it?
I've loved your discussion of research approach, but I'm thinking of the numbers of students you have for masters. In order to give this kind of format. If it is to undergraduate students, where you have very many of them, you have time to interface with them, or you just need to.
The answer is no.
Yeah, but it's a very good thing.
Exactly. I don't, first of all, I do not supervise. I'm mostly working with master students and PhD students, where the numbers are not that huge. And this is something I discuss with the ones I'm supervising. And you know, it's a very good place to be. The numbers are not that high, so we do spend quite a lot of time. Because if you do this for 70, 100 students, you know, you will anyhow not be able to discuss with them. So it requires a low number of students.
At the bachelor level, the last semester of the bachelor program, there is a bachelor thesis. And of course, that is very much more practical oriented. It's not research oriented like this. So I think it's very different. And that's a huge class. Not huge, but it could be about 50, 60, 70 students. So that's quite another attitude towards this. And well, in our study program, it's at least it's very practical oriented. Small tasks in the businesses, in the environment here, for example.
So it's different. And I'm also constantly thinking about when I have bachelor students, if we do, I think we do expect too much reflection from our bachelor students, because we don't have time to actually discuss and reflect together with them. So you know, in some sense we should be more saying, I put something in your head and I expect you to get that out of your mouth whenever I ask you to do the exam. In some sense, if that's the only model that is, you know, doable, that's a better model. But that's, Björn is laughing. Let's see, he's my boss, so we do expect you to come in. Come on, sure. Yeah.
About this framework, actually, definitely I use this framework for my PhD research, but I use this framework to review the paper as well. Fantastic. If you want to review someone's paper, just use this framework, and you can easily find out you can easily reject or accept the paper.
So I give you some multiple here.
I want to add something.
Come on.
So,
more or less discovers. Yeah.
I do have students who sometimes want that first question answered.
Yep.
They say, look, you give us the problem. And what are you working on? I
Yep.
participate.
Yep.
And for master students, many of them just say right away, you answer the first one, you also answer the methods.
Okay.
I'll do the rest.
Yeah.
And
I will check.
given the short time frame they have, I think it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
I think we would have seen that also.
Yeah. I think we are actually discussing that, especially in our master program, because the tradition here has been more or less that the students are coming up with the problems. There are several issues, there are several difficulties. One is that you know they don't know what is expected of a master thesis, so they don't know what's a good question to answer in this period of time. The second one is that you know maybe some of our supervisors are not that interested, and maybe the supervisors their competence doesn't really fit. And the third one is of course also that we would like students to help us out doing our work. So that's of course one reason I would like to ask the question. Because I would like you all to help me out running a project. So I divided it into 6 and I asked the 6 of you to do every bits and piece. And then I get you know the journal article, which is top of the glory. So you know I think we will go in the direction of more often answer the first question. And the more one good answer to that is that we know what is a good size of a project. Because our students, they spend 6 weeks figuring out if it's a good or bad question to start up with. But that's also a different expectation, because I think it's very difficult for, again, when I have these African students, they do expect me to answer more of these questions If I have Norwegian students, they may be, annoyed if I try to answer any of these questions, because they would really like to do their own stuff.
We at Stockholm DSC, we have an idea bank for the researchers to actually to give this, to do this part, area of concern, or maybe some topic, and limit the amount of work that is required. And then the students look at this bank, and if they find something that's suitable, they can choose it. If not, they have their bank idea, where they put their ideas. So that's how we do it.
So I think it's also to do with the cultural aspect that he was talking about. So at a bachelor's degree, like when I did my bachelor's in India, nobody asked me to do any project at that point. So I never thought of a question. Then I went to the US to do my master's. And even then for term papers, if you're put through this process of looking for topics, even for one course for a term paper, you go online, you read journal articles, and you give yourself the habit of what is a good question I can answer. And if you have done it at a term paper level for a course, then you can take it to a thesis level. If you haven't done it at a course level, doing it directly, which I was expected to for my master's thesis at the US, that was a big jump that I had to.
I think that's a very good point, that you need to be trained in doing this kind of stuff. And I think there is also where we are not somewhat not always fair with our students, because we do expect them, and that's it. In some sense I do expect them to be trained to ask these questions. Our kids are asking questions, about everything, but that's part of the society. You can easily, argue with your parents when you are 4 years old, and you will be expected to start up arguing and like that. That's different in different cultures, where you do accept, as the winner is saying, the doctor is the supervisor is almost a god. He has fallen far away from that after 3 years of working with us. But we need training to be good at training these, asking these questions. Come on, let's do stuff. Yeah, go on. In the middle.
Okay. Thank you. No, I think it's very interesting that from the point of view of the professor started having this interest for the intercultural communication involved in this process. Because, of course, for students who come from a different place, it doesn't really matter like where, just the fact of coming from a different place might really make a difference. And I was thinking, for example, that I did my bachelor in Colombia, and of course you always have to deal with the matter of authority, which changes a lot from one person to another, depending on your age, if it's like an older professor and all that. But here you have to adapt, also the cultural component. And the matter of expectation is something that I found really, it's like a variable that you have to take into account all the time, because it really depends. I've experienced a whole continuum of, from someone who expects that I came down from a tree and I barely can read and write, to someone who, like for example, like not professors, never, but for example like classmates, peers, let's say, like you do bring cocaine in your pocket, or something like that, these kind of things, to very high expectations, like this is a project, I hope you can do it, and I'll see you in 3 weeks, or just something.
Use your cocaine.
Stay away.
or something right in the middle. So it's like you never know how to.
Again, I don't have any good answers today, but I try to ask some questions, and I think you should ask the questions too. Whenever you are in that kind of relationship, which is something out of the box. The standard thing is that I get students that has almost the same background as myself from Kristiansand. But when you're outside that, ask these questions, reflect on what is going on here. And I think we should do that, and we are trying to do that, in between different supervisors as well. Come on, yeah.
I have two bits. One is about this, and I'm being a very picky epistemologist here, saying that although I don't like the data collection bit, because I think that when we talk about collection and how to plan to gather data, and there I see there's already an objectivist epistemology behind, which is, you know, data is something that I get, like I take a fruit from a tree, and I myself don't like the objectivist approach. I tend to be a constructivist.
Yeah.
So I would say data generation, and of course this is depending on research approach, or that's once you have a research approach and you go either for a positivist or a constructionist view, then data collection becomes data generation. So I mean, that's really slightly, that's the only correction I would do to correction in nuance, yeah, but I think it's important.
Exactly, yeah.
And the second thing is, I'm really glad that you bring up these intercultural communication issues, because I think it is definitely very, very crucial in the student supervisor relationship, but it's even more crucial when you are working in a project in developing countries, and I'm absolutely appalled that I did an extensive research in academic journal, etc., and I couldn't find very, very little information from developing agencies for, you know, all countries. It's just taken for granted still, and there's a very, very little awareness of how much these intercultural issues affect and impact the real implementation of projects. And the only agency that has a formal program on that I could find is CIDA, so it's not CIDA, but Canadian International Development Agency, and they have done extensive publications on, you know, really with a very, very rigorous scientific approach to check, you know, what is the perception, and not only from their expatriates, but the people working with the expatriates, and how big the mismatch was in terms of self-perception and the other perception. So I think that that's really an area that has to be explored much, much more, especially in SAT4D.
No, Philip, to the first one, let me just say, if you came back with that discussion, I would say this is good, because now a student is actually asking a question about you know, the framework.
Yeah.
Based on your answer, I will say, okay, you have some challenges on actually fulfilling, because you will start going in circles discussing that kind of issue. But that's another thing. Please adjust. And I also like to comment. Now we are in a situation where I would like you all to you take part, but that also needs to, in some manner, go forward. So you know, this is also part of what do we expect. Yeah. So I ask you all to take part, but please don't take part that much. We expect. So sorry, you'll get comments later on, but we'll expect you to know something about methods. And I also realize that we do have some expectations here on, you know, different methodologies and different approaches that are not always the same. Come on.
May I add?
Yeah.
Related to the other thing you already. What I do with my students, and actually my supervisor did to me as well, is I call it the funnel approach.
Yeah.
I ask him or her, what is your passion? What do you want to achieve? Is that the diploma in 3 months or 6 months, or a nice job, or something nice for society? And then build from there, going to a kind of question, let's say a research cloud, because it's still too big. And then see what fraction can be done, achieved. And then from there, looking at what you said in the framework, what is achievable, which are suitable things, what are they skilled at, or trained, whatever. So it's starting well from their own personal perspective.
Exactly. Sounds good. Sounds good. What I'm saying is that we do expect you to know something, and we do expect you to have some ideas on how to do this. I don't think we will go in depth on this one either. It's from Jim's book about case methods. So, but that's one. Actually, it's not a bad idea to start off with. But the reason for actually showing you this one is that in some sense, I do expect my students to be able to discuss and understand what are the different approaches. And I realized that, you know, when we have these meetings quite early in the process, I realized that very often that wasn't the case. It was actually only me, you know, telling you